that guy. I think they should. Nothing.
That's what I did, yeah. We got the kids.
Judith, you came the furthest, didn't you?
Well, no, Morehouse is
Ready?
in Clark.
Okay, good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Santa Barbara LAFCO Commission meeting for Thursday, October 5th, 2017. And do we have roll call, please?
Commissioners Aceves?
Here.
Commissioner Geyer?
Here.
Commissioner Hartman? Commissioner Ishkanian? Commissioner Lavanino? Commissioner Morehouse?
Here.
Commissioner Richardson?
Here.
Commissioner Stark? Here. Commissioner Waterfield? Here. Commissioner Well?
Here.
And Commissioner Wolf?
Here.
Let the record reflect that Commissioner Wolf, Geyer, and Morehouse are participating remotely from Santa Barbara, and all votes will be roll call.
Thank you. If you all please rise and pledge allegiance. Commissioner.
Place your hand over your heart. Repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and if we could just start with just a moment of silence for what happened in Las Vegas. All of us have our flags and have staff to remember them. So please, a moment of silence. Okay, thank you. We have a motion to approve the minutes of September 7th, 2017.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Is there any discussion on the minutes of September 7th? Okay, son, we have a first and second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Geyer?
Yes.
Commissioner Lavanino? Commissioner Morehouse?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson?
Yes.
Commissioner Well?
Abstain.
Commissioner Wolf?
Aye.
Chair Aceves?
Aye.
Motion passes, 6 with 1 abstention.
And now's the time we set aside for public comment on items not on this afternoon's agenda. Do we have any speaker slips?
Chair Aceves and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on general public comment today.
And confirm we have none in Santa Barbara.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. The consent calendar, does anybody wish to pull the reimbursements from the consent calendar? Do I have a second? It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar, which contains the disbursements for August and September of 2017. Roll call vote.
Commissioner Geyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Lavanino? Aye. Commissioner Morehouse?
Aye.
Commissioner Richardson? Aye. Commissioner Well? Aye. Commissioner Wolf?
Aye.
Chair Aceves?
Aye. Okay, moving to business item number 1, please.
Chair Aceves and members of the commission, business item number 1 is to consider approval of the impartial analysis for the formation of the Los Olivos Community Services District for inclusion in ballot measure for the upcoming election.
Mr. Hood.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Hood, LAFCO Executive Officer. Just briefly, the history of this proposal, this business item, is that on April 13th, 2017, the Commission approved the formation of the Los Olivos Community Services District. Subsequently, a protest hearing was held on June 21st and resulted in insufficient protests. September 7th, your Commission adopted a resolution acknowledging the results of the protest hearing and directing the Board of Supervisors to direct the county elections to conduct the necessary election on behalf of the proposed district. Last Tuesday, October 3rd, the Board of Supervisors approved the election schedule, and as part of that, the election will be held, a mail ballot election on June 30th. 2018. Your additional responsibilities pursuant to the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act are to approve the impartial analysis, which I have developed with the assistance of legal counsel, and are presenting that to you today in business item 1. So I would recommend approval of the impartial analysis. Also, county elections looked at it, and we're kind of ahead of the game. We don't really need to do this until the rebuttal arguments are prepared for the election. But trying to get ahead and do this now, I'd recommend that you approve the impartial analysis as presented in the staff report. And at this point, be happy to answer any questions, as legal counsel will also respond if you have questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hood. Any questions from the commission?
Question.
Mr. Well.
Mr. Hood, I'm curious about the Consumer Price Index, and for the prior 12 months, do we have an idea what that is in terms of a percentage?
It really depends. My employment contract is also linked to that. Sorry, my employment contract is also linked to that. For example, as of June 30th, the percentage was 2.2%. So it's the preceding 12 months. It changes every month.
And then remind me why the Consumer Price Index for Los Angeles and Long Beach.
That's one of the indexes that we use in Santa Barbara.
Okay.
So it's historically been that index that's used rather than a combination approach, say the Bay Area or San Francisco or some other areas, but it's linked to Los Angeles and Long Beach.
Thank you.
Generally.
Mr. Stark.
I do have a question. Am I correct that there would be a separate ballot slot for the special tax, and that if the tax does not pass by 2/3 vote, then the formation wouldn't be effective because that's a condition of formation? Is that correct?
That's exactly correct. There's with 3 items.
I think he's asking for the tax numbers.
I'll let legal counsel.
Unlike the formation of the Isla Vista CSD, which by that particular statute had a separate measure for the tax from the measure for the formation. This particular formation, when you look at the statute, it actually requires one ballot measure for both the formation and the tax. Hence, it's as described in the impartial analysis, a 2/3 vote for the formation and the special tax. The special tax driving the 2/3 vote, and then so I think that answers it.
One vote needs 2/3.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So there would be 3 items on that on the ballot. One would be approval of the Los Olivos CSD. One is a 2/3 vote that requires the special tax, and the election of directors. So there's 3 items.
I have to disagree with Paul on this. But no, I went over this quite a bit in detail with the elections and the attorney for elections, Ann Ryerson, and it's clear the statute lumps the formation and the tax together in the item to be put on the ballot. And that's how it's set up in the impartial analysis. I'm sure of that, Paul. I'm sorry to. The board of directors is elected separately, yes.
That's a 3rd item, the board of directors.
I don't know if that's 1 item or 5 items when you elect 5 board members, but the tax and the formation is 1 item, though. I'm sure of that.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
Okay, any other questions for staff?
I apologize for asking.
Mr. Chair.
All right. May I have a motion to approve staff recommendation?
No, wait, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Wolf, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question on this taxing portion. So basically, when this goes to the voters, they're voting for the maximum annual special tax, and that's listed in the first bullet. But then the second bullet says the actual tax levied for any fiscal year shall be determined by the board of directors. So does that mean that that a resident could be taxed in 2 different ways? I just need clarification. one would be by this measure, and then once the board of directors is formed, they could tax again at an amount that they determine?
The ballot measure would read up to 200,000, but the actual amount would be determined by the board of directors. And some of it could be dependent upon donations that may be received to support the operation of the district. This is only until the Prop 218 election is passed, which would be subsequent to that, within 1 year following the formation if it's approved. So it would be up to 200,000.
Okay, and then there's another election then on the actual amount.
The actual amount would
Is that what you're saying?
Would be decided by the board of directors up to the 200,000 maximum. But following that, there would be, and that's for the administrative costs of the district, the manager, that kind of thing, staff. But then following that, there would be a Prop 218 special assessment election that would actually fund the construction and maintenance of the collection and disposal system of the wastewater operation within the community. And then the special tax would be stopped, would be deleted. That's a condition of approval.
So, thank you for that. So, just hearing that information, it doesn't seem that this impartial analysis really states that, unless, so Mr. Dillon, can you just assure me that the language does affirm what we just heard, that there will be a Prop 218 subsequent assessment?
That's one of the conditions of the LAFCO approval of formation, and so it is a requirement. So under the
I'm just saying, if I was a voter and I read this, I'm not sure I would know that.
Well, the impartial analysis is not meant to explain every single in and out of the conditions of approval of the district. Rather, it puts the voter on notice as to the formation and the conditions of approval, and then there's a standard provision at the end of the
Page 2.
Page 2.
Let me ask a question. I think I can clarify.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. It is in there. The district's authority to levy a special tax shall terminate once the district successfully adopts that assessment. That's stated in the first bullet on page 2. And so, Commissioner Wolf, did I get your question yet, or do you want to do another follow-up? I'm not sure I did.
Yeah, I think you answered it by saying that you're comfortable that we're fulfilling everything that we need to fulfill.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the staff's recommendation? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Guyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Lavanino? Commissioner Morehouse?
Aye.
Commissioner Richardson? Commissioner Welt?
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf?
Aye.
Chair Seves?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Next.
Chair Seves and members of the board, informational item number 1 is to receive and file a report on the 2017 LAFCO Annual Conference in San Diego, October 25th, 2017 through October 27th, 2017.
Mr. Hood.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just putting this item on the agenda just to remind the commissioners of the Cal LAFCO conference that's coming up at the end of this month. It seems that these things always move up very quickly, but we have registered a number of commissioners and staff to attend the conference in San Diego, October 25th through the 27th. And there is also a need to house some of the commissioners in adjacent hotels. We got quite an interest in attending the conference this year, and we did last year too when it was in San Diego, or in Santa Barbara. The mobile workshop includes a look at the desal plant in Carlsbad and tour of the Encina power station. We wanted to have the Santa Barbara desal plant on our mobile workshop last year, but it was not ready for showing, and it seems that it's still in the process of being ready for full operation. I also have, last month we assigned voting delegates, and I also now have various items from the business report that was sent to me that I'll send to the commissioners and Chairman Seves and Vice Chair Roger Welt, who will be the voting delegate and the alternate, that talk about the business meeting. There's a packet, and also there's different items that will need to be decided on at the business meeting. So I'll send those out to you and copy the rest of the commissioners. So with that, I know that we have been trying to nail down the accommodations and travel. So if you have any questions and need any additional assistance, Jacqueline and myself are willing to help. So just contact us, and we'll make sure that everything is finalized. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to respond.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Hood?
I have a question. I think it's for Mr. Hood. Is there a way to ensure that those of us who are relegated to the satellite hotels have some means of communicating in case people want to, get together for meals or something like that? Is there an effective way to do that?
Well, you have my cell phone. I think commissioners have my cell phone, and I'll hand it out and make sure that I'm the contact person on that.
Fine.
I know you have my cell phone.
I do. Food first is generally the appropriate motto for any given conference.
Camaraderie.
No, that's very good. I'll follow up on that. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hood's the social director. Thank you. All right. Receive and file next.
Chair Seves and members of the Commission, informational item number 2 is to receive and file a report on the municipal service reviews and the sphere of influence update schedule.
Thank you. Mr. Hood.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a PowerPoint that somewhere. Great. At last month's commission meeting, there was some question about the status of the municipal service reviews and sphere of influence updates. And since we didn't have any proposals on this agenda, I decided to do a PowerPoint and update the commission on where we stand as far as these updates. And I went into quite a bit of detail, and I don't propose to include a lot of the information in the staff report that you have received, which lists the various districts, but I'll go through some of the procedures, more of an educational and update for the commission. So the state law requires that spheres of influence be updated on a 5-year basis. And when I reported to the commission and wanted to get a schedule of what you expected me to do over the next couple of years, and this was about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, I was advised that I should go ahead and communicate with the special districts and the cities in the county and institute or make changes to their spheres of influence as necessary. And if there are significant changes to city general plans and sphere of influence revisions would be required, then I would present those to you. So in the meantime, on January 7th, the Commission reaffirmed spheres of influence for 6 of the 8 cities, cities of Buellton, Guadalupe, Lompoc, Santa Barbara, Santa Maria, and Solvang. And they were reaffirmed spheres of influence that were assigned in 2012. There was a couple of cities, city of Carpinteria, that had some minor changes. So in January, the Commission approved some very minor changes having to do with alignments of freeway and splitting parcels. Carpinteria Cemetery property was within the city's sphere of influence. At least half of it was, so we changed that. And then the city of Goleta in February came back to your commission and identified 3 areas that the city would like to see considered in the sphere of influence. So I contacted the city manager and the city planning director at that point and advised them they should submit an application with the questionnaire that is required to update city spheres of influence and districts. In communication with the new Goleta Community Development Director, Peter Imhoff, who some of you probably know from SB CAG, he's fairly new and would like to go back to the council prior to initiating any changes. And I have a map in the back of the staff report, last page, that identifies the areas that the city was asking to be included pending an application being filed. So that's kind of on hold until city planning director decides to go back to the council. I talked to Chairman Aceves about that, and that could be sometime in the foreseeable future. Between February 12th and 17th, 2016, I sent out several sphere of influence letters to various districts: Carpinteria Cemetery, Goleta, Guadalupe, Lompoc, Los Alamos, Oak Hill, and Santa Maria Cemetery districts, and also Carpinteria Sanitary District, Carpinteria Summerland Fire District, Fire Protection, Carpinteria Valley Water District, Summerland Sanitary District, Goleta Sanitary, Goleta Water, Goleta West Goleta Sanitary District, Montecito Fire, Montecito Sanitary District, and Water District. I used up a lot of paper, and a lot of information was mailed requesting them to respond if they had any issues or wanted to see their spheres updated. So in May, we came back to the commission and confirmed spheres of influence for Goleta Cemetery, Sanitary District, Water District, Montecito Sanitary District, thanks Judith, and Summerlin Sanitary District. This was followed in August of 16 with confirming spheres of influence for Goleta Sanitary, Goleta West Sanitary, and I'll talk a little more about those 2 districts in a minute, Santa Maria Cemetery District, Oak Hill Cemetery District, Guadalupe Cemetery District, Lompoc Cemetery, and Los Alamos Cemetery District. So there's a lot of districts in the county, and there's lots of letters that went out and responses were received. In May, there was a discussion that I had with the Goleta West and Goleta Sanitary District about a report that was approved back in September of 2005 that talked about a common sphere of influence for both districts. And what that means is that they were assigned, supposedly assigned the same sphere of influence. The exterior boundaries of both districts were included in this common sphere of influence. However, when I went back and looked at the supplemental staff report that was included, the reference to the common sphere of influence was deleted, and instead both spheres of influence included their respective boundaries. So instead of looking to consolidate those 2 districts, the commission approved respective district boundaries that were not a common sphere of influence, but were independent for each district, I should say, not both, but for each. So that was clarification that came back to your commission. In addition, we had a couple of new districts that were formed, the Isla Vista Community Services District and Coyama Basin Water District. I'm sure that you remember those, and that at the time they were allocated spheres of influence that were coterminous with their current district boundaries. And several, actually 3 districts did not respond to my request for information: the Carpinteria Valley Water District, Montecito Fire Protection District, and Montecito Water District. So I have received several phone calls in the last day or 2 saying that they would like to respond at this point. At least one district wants to respond to my request and requested a second, third letter to be sent out. In addition, I point out that the Carpinteria Sanitary District has been proposing for some time to include some additional ag land within their sphere of influence, and that was mentioned verbally during the update process, and they were also advised that an application and questionnaire should be submitted to LAFCO And to date, no application has been filed with LAFCO staff, but we may be seeing that in the foreseeable future. So kind of summarizing here, there are 22 independent districts that have not been reviewed. 3 did not respond to the original request. And additionally, there are 13 dependent districts, including 8 CSAs, county service areas, that have not been reviewed at this point. And in conclusion, I'll summarize this. Staff has consulted with all cities, and a list of special districts included in the staff report. 7 of the 8 cities have been confirmed, spheres of influence have been confirmed or amended. 19 of the 37 districts, including the 2 new districts, have been adopted, confirmed, or amended, and the remaining districts will be reviewed in the next year and a half to try and update those. Just to give you a flavor for, we've done over half of the districts and are looking at some of the dependent districts and several independent special districts, and potentially 1 city that may be amended in the future. So that's my my summary of the update process, and be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Hood. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Hartman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hood, Guadalupe Cemetery District, I've had some questions about that. There's a new residential development there that's now going up, and is that included in their district, or how does that happen if it isn't?
I'm not sure if it is. I'll need to take a look at the map, and that may be something we'd want to add to it. Usually the cemetery districts are much larger boundaries than the existing development. So we'll have to see, what the map looks like, and I'll follow up on it.
Okay, let's work together on that, because they need more money, and this would be one way to get it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Are you having a problem getting these districts to respond to your letters? Is there timelines or time limits that they should be observing?
I usually put in a timeline, and it's fairly tight, within 30 to 40 days, 45 days. And most of the districts, I follow up with phone calls and try and contact them. Just like everything else, when you receive, and I include a letter, the previous municipal service review and sphere of influence, and so that they know what the commission has done in the past. But it's like everything else, that they receive these letters and they say, well, I'll get to that later.
Is there an enforcement process available to encourage them to respond?
I'm not sure there's an enforcement process.
I mean, if they choose not to respond, if they choose not to respond for 10 years, is that an okay?
Well, what I would do, and generally what I have done, is say that if they don't respond, that we just approve the current sphere of influence without any amendments. And so I would bring that back, and in a couple of cases that happened. And the cemetery districts, they don't have a large staff. And so I say that, basically if you don't respond within the time period, then we'll just bring it back to the commission and confirm what the existing sphere is. That's one way to do it.
And then in the future, when they want to make some changes within that sphere or amend to or expand into the sphere, is there a problem doing that, or do they have to?
Yeah, they have to amend the sphere of influence before they can approve annexations, and that's a prerequisite in state law, that they have to be within the sphere of influence.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Geyer.
Yeah, just to clarify, there's 3 districts that have not responded, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I talked to Montecito Water yesterday, and I believe their general manager called?
He did call me, yes, yesterday afternoon.
Okay. All right, so we're down to 2.
That I would send out a second letter, third letter. And also I talked to the, I haven't talked to the general manager of the Isla Vista Rec and Parks District. We've traded 3 or 4 phone calls in the last day or so. So I will follow up with him, although we did not request any information from them during the process that I just described. But I will be sending out more letters and requests for information in the next couple of months.
Right, because I talked to Rodney yesterday, and he said that he had never received it, so, the original letter.
Right, he didn't receive a copy because I didn't send it to that district.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, receive and file next.
Chair Seves and members of the commission, informational item number 3 is to receive and file a report on the 2016 through 2017 fiscal year billings from the county assessor and county elections.
Mr. Hood.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm placing this on the agenda because I was a little actually taken aback by a filing that was made on the county's fin system billing LAFCO for some fiscal year 2016-17 costs from the assessor's office and from county elections for work that they had done for various proposals, LAFCO proposals. And we did receive a bill last year, which was for approximately $11,000 that was paid from the commission's budget. And I didn't see that was a significant issue that needed to come back to you. But in this year's billing, I was surprised that the amount was so high, and it's included in page 3 of the staff report. We received a bill for $62,910, and that was divided between the assessor's office and county elections. $13,675 for the assessor's office and $10,197 from elections. But I was equally surprised that we're also billed for the assessor's indirect costs, which account for an additional, for the assessor, the 75.22%, and for county elections for 204.53% on top of the $10,197 bill. So the $10,000 bill ended up with a $20,000 increase in indirect costs and amounted to $31,000 approximately, where the original bill was $10,000. So, I contacted both elections and the assessor's office to see, first of all, why this was billed, and was informed, and if there was some mistake, maybe there was an additional 0 or 2 zeros on the bill. But they told me that was not the case, and that they bill for the amount of time that they spend pursuant to time cards that are filed. And so I held off paying the bill for about a week and a half until I was contacted back by the deputy county assessor. And as you know, the assessor and elections are all part of the county clerk's office. So I'm presenting this to you because where the overhead went. Oh, okay.
Needing to know what are indirect costs,
It's the
not itemized, but indirect.
oh, the not itemized costs. Well, there's what happens is that the county auditor assigns indirect costs as county overhead rates, and meaning that they bill for additional costs of running the county that can be assigned to each department, basically, based on lawsuits, based on costs for building maintenance, costs for this and that. And so included in my billing rate was a letter from Theo Filati outlining what the overhead rate would be, and I didn't include that in the staff report. But that's added to the cost that we also get an overhead rate, which we included in our budget for LAFCO, and that was 2 years previous year's budget was a credit, and this year was an additional $74,000 that was added to our budget that we billed to the funding agencies, and that created some raised eyebrows on the part of the commissioners when they looked at that, and we asked the county auditor to come explain how that was calculated, and he did. But the bottom line is that there's no negotiation that can take place once these billings are assigned. That's what they charge, and it's based on a Office of Management and Budget County circular A87, as I understand it, that tells the counties and cities and how to bill their costs, including indirect costs. So what I tried to do was go into I asked the auditor and the assessor if they could divide out the amount of money that was that they spent by elections and by the assessor for each LAFCO proposal. So I thought that was a fair way to do it. And the spreadsheet that you have, that I have on the screen and that was given to you, discusses how much money was assigned by project. So if you look at and I don't know if I can use I don't think it shows up on the screen, but and if I turn around, I'm going to lose the microphone, so I'll just go ahead and kind of talk about it. So the election costs, there's basically three. Oh, can I use this? Oh, I think it shows up too well. But for each one of the costs, the elections and assessors totals, there's three LAFCO proposals that we were billed. One was the West Santa Ynez annexation, one was the Coyama Water District formation, and the other was the Los Olivos CSD. And the assessor's office, the same thing. When we request registered voters for mailing purposes, for elections, for checking protest hearings, then the assessor's office provides information to county elections about the mailing addresses so that we have notified everybody completely as far as the protest hearings and as far as the hearing information for the ballot. So they were able to come up with the hours that were spent by, let's use the Santa Ynez West annexation. Elections spent 67.50 hours, and they spent 98 hours from the assessor's office for a total of 165.50. So what I did was divide the charges that we received by the amount of hours. I came up with an hourly rate and divided that by the amount of time that was spent on each proposal and the amount of money that would be determined based on the hourly rate. And so I came up with these totals. There were 64.5 hours that could not be determined for projects that were, they could not tell me which projects they spent time on. It was the time codes didn't show it. It just was a LAFCO cost. So if we decided to bill out these rates that were charged based on proposals, then the totals at the bottom, election assessor totals, would be $28,692 for the West Santa Ynez, $3,196 for the Coyama Water District, and $22,318 for the Los Olivos CSD for election and assessor costs. And that totals the $62,910 that was sent to me in the bill from county elections and county assessor's office. And again, I didn't budget for this because I just received it like a week ago, 2 weeks ago. And so I'm presenting it to you as a possible means of recovering some of these costs that were spent specifically on proposals, the three proposals that I've outlined, and recovering the costs. And our fee schedule says that we can bill a flat amount, but based on total project costs, we can recover the additional amount that is spent by LAFCO to process a proposal. And I think that that is fair, and that's what I would propose to do, unless the commission, this is an information item, so unless you direct me to bring it back for further discussion, I will be sending out bills to the three proposals that were a result of the billing that we received. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. I had a question on...
Chair Seves?
Okay, hold on.
Chair Seves?
Yeah, I'll get you in just a second, Commissioner Guyer. I just had a question on the 229.18, which shows the hourly rate. Is that the fully loaded rate, including the 75% overhead?
Yes. Yes, it is. It includes the county, the overhead rate, indirect cost rate.
And the 75% is to pay for other administrative functions above the person who is handling whatever project that was?
Right.
Okay.
And it's the same thing that we do with the clerk to the board's office. We get billed for hourly rate, and then we have a countywide overhead rate that's included in addition to that. And I think it's 60%.
And you did say that in our agreements with the different entities, that we can turn around and send them a bill and not encumber it.
Right, up to the point that cannot determine time spent on each project rate, which is hours were 64.5. That the rate would be, the amount would be $8,703. That they can't tie it to a project, so I would assume that's just general LAFCO questions that we had, and determining who's the landowner, what the assessed value is that we put in all of our staff reports. So they could not assign these to any one of the projects.
Okay. Commissioner Guyer and then Commissioner Richardson.
Yeah, my first question was that cannot determine time spent on projects. That's a sizable number to not be able to determine. And I would like to express that I do support billing these entities for the additional work. That's what we passed that. I don't know, it's a rule or whatever we have, but that we do charge for the additional time on the applications.
Commissioner Richardson.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. My question is, the assessor's charges were to determine the number of voters that were within the district and their APNs or something?
Yeah, generally the assessor is required, has a list of registered owners of parcels. And in the case of the West Santa Ynez annexation, they spent a good amount of time on determining, what the protest was, and it ended up being 24.7% rather than 25% that would have sent it to an election. But legal counsel also spent a lot of time on that, trying to determine, who is legally able to protest. Is, for instance, if it's a joint ownership, if it's a trust, if there's two separate owners, a man and a wife, or some unrelated person. And so we spent, both Bill, legal counsel Bill and myself, spent a large amount of time because the protests were so close that it could easily have gone to an election if there was one miscalculation, but that's what they do. And
Commissioner Richardson, one reason the landowner protest is so complicated is that the protest is deemed successful if 25% of the number of owners of land who also own at least 25% of the assessed value of the land within the affected territory file a protest. So you have to, first of all, figure out how many owners there are. Some properties have two owners, like a man and a wife, or partnerships. Some are owned by corporations, some are owned, there's a question of, how do you vote on if it's a community property, is that 2 votes or 1 vote? And then once you do that, if there's 3 listed owners on a property, because maybe they inherited the property from their parent, so you have 3 legitimate owners. Well, if only one of those people files a protest, well, you got 1 owner filing a protest, you have to determine what percentage of the property he owns, which is usually a third, and then what's the assessed value of that third. So when you get into the nitty-gritty of going over, I don't know how many lots we had, but a lot of them, fall into place right away, but we had over 400 lots, but many, many more owners than lots. And so the assessor, by the time they started running spreadsheets and then asking legal questions, how does a community property interest vote, how does a joint venture vote, how does a tenancy in common vote, what's the law and all that. So it got to be quite complicated. And it was all resolvable, but what we found is some LAFCOs have been through this before in intense situations like what we had in Los Olivos, where it was a very close vote, and they figure out the law. Oh, excuse me, this was the Santa Ynez West annexation. And other LAFCOs never, get a close landowner protest, so they never, you ask them how this works, and we've never tried to figure that out because we never had to. But it's, we learned a lot in this process, but it really took a lot of hard work, and that's one reason the costs were high.
Are all three of these projects, are they roughly the same population or same properties? They're varying?
Well, I wouldn't say there's
a few hundred votes or a few hundred property owners or something like that? There was an excessive amount in one case and very few in another?
Well, in the case of the Koyama Water District, there's large property owners, as you recall from the hearing. There's basically three property owners that own over 50% of the area. It's like 83,000 acres. But there's some small property owners. Basically, this was a landowner application, that the election was a landowner election. In the Santa Ynez, there were approximately 400 homes, and population, I would guess, would be over 1,000, maybe 1,200. Los Olivos population is about 1,000 people, but we are also required to give notice to every registered voter and landowner within the district and within 300 feet of the district. So it turns out, and Jacqueline knows from having mailed all of these notices, it turns out to be a huge deal to make sure everybody was adequately noticed. And we also have to publish notice in the newspaper and post notice.
Do the notices come under the elections office or the assessor's office or our office?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to know.
We get lists from the assessor's office and from county elections, but generally we can run, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jacqueline, but we can run labels from those spreadsheets that they give to us that in some cases we would send out to have stuffing done and mailing, but in many cases we send them out.
On the elections office, are those costs just because they counted votes, or is there more involved than that?
We need to have, from them, we need to have a list of registered voters, because we've been informed that the list of registered voters changes daily. And to qualify signatures on applications, when they received, I think they received almost 40% of the registered voters within Los Olivos in the application, so they need to be qualified to vote. And just because somebody signs it and says we're registered to vote, we don't make that determination. We're not, LAFCO staff is not able to come up with, are they really registered to vote? And in some cases they may have moved, they may not be registered. But at that particular point in time, say one day that we give them a date, that's how many registered voters there would be, but they need to check all of the lists. And we can't do that, and there's nobody else that can do that like the county assessor and county elections, because we could not contract this out, and they would do the same thing. They go back to the same people that we would ask directly.
Chair Seves, Commissioner Lavanino, and then, okay, who from Santa Barbara?
Morehouse.
Commissioner Morehouse, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. First, was this bill paid prior to your approval to have it paid?
No, it was actually paid this week, because before I got all this information, I was not going to pay the bill because I had some issues and questions for the assessor's office and elections. But my bottom line was, after you've done all this analysis, is the bill going to change? And I was told no.
So, well, I guess the question is also, would it be normal for us to, or for you to pay a bill of that magnitude that has not been addressed by the commission in our budget?
Well, when we get bills, review them and ask questions. It was sitting in my inbox for almost 3 weeks until I got the information I needed. And legal counsel and myself looked at it. But this is a bill that is owed by LAFCO. It was not budgeted, and so that's why I'm bringing it back to you. There is a means of recovery for the projects, and I've been told that we should recover all of the costs from applications that we can and not have LAFCO or the funding agencies pay these bills. So there is an opportunity to recover these costs.
And that's a very good segue into my next question or observation, and that is, I just personally I find it unacceptable that we can have a $9,000 line item that says cannot determine time spent on each project. That's $9,000 that we can't bill out to anybody, and I'm now having memories of the $50,000 debacle with SPCAG and LAFCO. And is that $9,000 really billed to us, or was it another mistake?
Okay, well, I think what Mr. Hood is doing is further looking into it. We had to pay the bill, and now we'll charge it back to the entities. We kind of got surprised by this with the timing of it, but it is what it is. Mr. Levanino.
Well, I would like to have an explanation from the assessor's office and the elections office a little bit more than cannot determine time spent on each project. I really would like to know why they can't determine it, and perhaps they can address that at a future meeting.
I agree. Mr. Lavanino and then Mr. Geyer.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think that's right. I think that it says cannot determine time spent on projects that are not listed above.
Is it on each project?
On each project, which is, the projects that they can determine, these 3 are listed, but they cannot determine the 64.5 hours that were spent on other projects.
That's crazy.
That's the way I read it.
I don't understand why that's crazy. So on a general LAFCO, so they're coded to LAFCO, but there might not be a project associated with a question that you're calling about, correct? Okay. So maybe saying cannot determine time spent on each project, maybe a better way, and I'll have the assessor, if he's able to come in and talk about it, which we'll make him available to do, would say that that's general questions that come in and we code it to LAFCO. Might not have been about a San Ynez or Cuyama or something else. It could be a general question. So the other thing I'd like to remind the other commissioners too is our rate is $175. I think it's $175, correct? So these aren't exorbitant, and I think that they should be. We should, and I'd like to kind of hear what your options are. I mean, are we just going to send a letter to these folks? I think we should sit down, just like we didn't get surprised, so we don't surprise somebody else with, hey, here's something in an envelope you're not going to want to open. I would suggest that we sit down, I hope you would, and call them and say, hey, let's talk about this and talk about how we get to full cost recovery. So, but I totally get having that 8,700 there, and I'll see if we can for the next meeting have Mr. Filati come in and explain how time cards are coded, and if there isn't a specific project, how a better way to maybe code the timesheet.
That leads me to another question.
Hold on a minute. Mr. Welt, and then Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I share my colleagues' concern with the cannot determine time spent on each project. 8,700 seems like fuzzy accounting to me, and I would like to suggest that we bring whoever we need to bring in here to explain that. $8,700, $8,700. Thank you.
Mr. Richardson.
That leads me to if these costs, for example, if Los Olivos CSD is not formed, who pays those costs? Because we can't bill a non-entity.
Well, Well, this would, it would go to the applicant, because when the applicant files an application, then they are responsible for paying the processing fees.
Okay, so the applicant will pay all these costs?
That's correct.
Each of these, okay, thank you.
And, in the case of, the San Ynez, West San Ynez, that was the district, the West San Ynez Community Services District, that filed on behalf of the property owners. And there were 400 property owners. In the case of Coyama, that was the property owners as well. And in the case of Los Olivos, it was the registered voters. But there are some chief petitioners as well that signed the petition.
Okay.
So I would propose, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on Commissioner Lavanino's question, that I was not intending to just send out a bill, but I wanted to make your commission aware of what this bill that came in from the assessor's office and elections. And I think it really is incumbent upon me to contact the proponents of each of these three proposals and let them know what to expect. And we will follow up on the cannot determine and have Keith Taylor or the Joe Holland or someone from their staff come in and explain what the undetermined amount is, but I sense that it is based on just general LAFCO questions or responding to applications that come in, which they do routinely.
Okay, and the other thing I'd like is to have this recalendared for next month and have all the entities contacted and people here to answer the questions so we can resolve the matter. Anybody else? Commissioner Hartman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 points. One is, I think Commissioner Lavanino made a good point about notice, but I think it's not just after the fact, but in the future, what can we learn from this so that people have some sense of what they're getting into ahead of time? And that raises my second question. Surely this has happened before. I appreciated understanding how difficult a protest election is, and I like getting that kind of analysis to support the charges, but clearly we must have encountered this before, so why is this a surprise for us now?
Well, we actually, I haven't encountered this level of protest or this level of notification, at least since I've been here. And when I go back to my 29 and a half years in San Luis Obispo County, there's rarely, unless we have a formation of a district, and I formed many districts in that county, something like 10 or 11 CSDs and consolidations and that kind of thing, which we have mailed out. But to be honest, we were never billed for this. I mean, this was just something, the cost of doing business that was absorbed by the county. Because what it means is that if they, and since I've been here, we only have that one instance last year where we received a bill for $11,000. But I guess in this day and age that people are looking to recover costs that, anywhere they can. They kind of beat the bushes and, see how they can do cost recovery. And, we have the same, I have the same instructions from the commission that, bill for the cost so we can eliminate the funding from the cities, the special districts, and the county to the maximum extent. But we only recover about 10% of the costs of LAFCO doing business through applications. The rest is divided 1/3 each between the county, the cities, and the special districts. And if we did full cost recovery, our applications would be, $50,000 each or something. If we, we have a $450,000 budget, and if we had 9 applications, they'd be, a lot, 50,000. And we would be, discouraging applications from being filed where we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that all of our applications are reasonable and logical and, comply with spheres of influence and preserve ag land and control urban sprawl and open space, and are, most effective in terms of providing services from those agencies, be it the special districts, the county, or the cities. So we don't want to defeat the purpose of LAFCO by overcharging for applications, and it just wouldn't happen.
And then if I recall, I think you said the last time we received not a rebate, but we got money back from them. Did they not charge us, or we had a credit?
We actually had an application that was deemed inactive. The Santa Rita Hills Bridge and Highway District. I don't know if I want to bring that up, but we did refund $8,000 last year.
Okay, but I think Commissioner Hartman's question is right on point. I think we need to answer that when we bring it back next month, so that there are no surprises, not only to us, but also to the applicants. So I think we should spend some time on it next month. Okay. Very
Chair
good.
Seves?
Mr. Guyer.
Yeah, I assume that this bill was paid out, because it wasn't a line item in our budget, it was paid out of reserves?
No, it was billed to by other, and that's a good point too, because we don't have a contract with the assessor's office or elections. So generally, it would just come out of a general consulting or, fund. I forget the exact account number. But, we still, when we get a bill, we still need to pay it, which I did.
Okay. I guess
I assume it came out of reserves. I assume that the payment came out of reserves because it wasn't in the budget. So next month, can we have an accounting of where our reserves are at?
Yeah, I think at year end we only had maybe 60,000 in reserves, but I'll go back and check that.
So let's have additional discussion on this item next month, talk about where the money came from and where the money goes back into as we get it back from the districts. Okay, are we done?
No.
I thought you were done.
No, I had my button up here. I should be done because this is going to be a frivolous question. Since they charge us $8,000 to answer questions over the telephone, what are they going to charge us when they throw that microphone over there to answer questions? Or shall we not? Maybe we should never call them and have them come before us.
We're not meeting here anymore. Rent's going to be too high from now on, sorry.
All right, let's move on. We'll receive and file. That item will be coming back as a business item next month. Thank you for everybody's input. All right, on to commissioner's announcements or requests for future agenda items. Do we have anything other than what we just covered? Seeing none, Mr. Hood, your report.
Just had a couple of quick things. We're now starting to work on the San Antonio Basin Water District, and they have retained a consultant to prepare the petition for LAFCO. We have a copy of it we're looking at, and so we'll be meeting with the proponents of the district, and this is going to be similar to a Sigma district, similar to the Coyama Basin Water District. And we're looking over the petition right now. We don't have the application, so we don't have any processing fees, but we're going through our due diligence and making sure the application is complete. And then we do have a date for the Special District Selection Committee, and that is on January 22nd, 2018. And there will be two things on the agenda, and it will be the same time as Special Districts chapter meeting, which is held monthly. And the special district appointment to LAFCO, we have one term that's going to be up in March, and the RDA Oversight Committee appointment to have one special district member sit on the RDA Oversight Committee, and we're working on getting a letter from one of the districts asking that LAFCO put that on and send out nominations. So that's all I had.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Hood?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Hood, can you remind us the area of the San Antonio proposed water district?
It's close to Vandenberg Air Force Base on Los Alamos, It does not include the base and goes around the Los Alamos Community Services District. I don't have a map available, but that is one of the things that they will need to supply to us. And as I mentioned to the proponents, it's through Supervisor Adams' office that is looking at this, and his chief of staff, that don't underestimate the amount of time it takes to prepare a map and legal description, and the amount of checking that it's going to take from various people, the county surveyor's office. And so that could be a couple of months, but we'll have a more specific map as this moves along.
Does Vandenberg Air Force Base, do they play a part in this? Will they be involved?
They will not be included in the boundaries.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next meeting of this commission will be November 2nd, Thursday, in Santa Barbara. And with that, our meeting is adjourned.